Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's um, this profound expectation of precision.
Oh, yeah. It's like engineering.
Exactly. It's basically engineering. Like you fall off your bike, you break your arm, you go to the hospital.
Right.
And the doctor pulls up that x-ray, points to that stark, jagged white line against the black background, and just says, there it is.
Yeah. It's entirely binary. Like, it is undeniably, objectively a broken bone. There's no debate about the lived experience of the radius or the ulna.
Right. Broken or not broken. It's clean. And, there is something incredibly comforting about that.
Totally. We really like things to be visible.
We do. As humans, we like them to be categorized. We want a concrete cause and a concrete effect so we can, apply a concrete solution.
Makes sense.
But then you step away from the medical world and into the world of modern relationships specifically, into the domestic sphere between men and women.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and suddenly that x-ray machine is completely shattered. We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is honestly incredibly murky.
It's a landscape where the cause and effect are totally disconnected.
Exactly. And mapping it out feels almost impossible. But that is exactly what we're attempting to do today. Welcome, listener, to today's deep dive.
We have a genuinely fascinating, highly provocative journey for you today.
We really do. We're looking at a brand new ebook that basically attempts to build an x-ray machine for that exact relational murkiness.
And it's guaranteed to hook your curiosity.
100%. Whether you're actively looking for a massive paradigm shift in how you view your own life, or, you are just trying to understand the intense undercurrents of our current cultural zeitgeist.
So before we plunge into the deep end, do us a quick favor.
Yes, please hit that like and subscribe button right now so you don't miss any of our future explorations. And trust us, you're going to want to explore this one further.
Definitely. You can grab today's book on Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books.
And you can follow the author's ongoing, continued work at the handle at Conrad Riker on Substack.
So the text we are unpacking today is called Emotional Tithe: How Men Pay for the Privilege of Being Destroyed by Discomfort.
Quite the title.
Right. It's written by Sophie Marie Eva Riker. And our mission for this deep dive is to completely unpack her extensive, highly charged, and frankly deeply architectural analysis of modern relationships.
Yeah, as well as our current institutions and the shifting dynamics of gender.
But we need to pause right here at the top.
Yeah, we have to offer a very strict, explicit impartiality disclaimer.
Crucial step.
Right. Because we know our audience. We know that many of you listening are keenly interested in understanding the history of our institutions, how they operate today and how they evolved before the massive cultural shifts we see now.
The shifts involving feminism and Marxism specifically.
Exactly. And this book is explicitly written for a men's rights and red-pilled audience. It contains highly polarized, politically charged claims regarding those topics and what the author describes as total institutional capture.
So we want to make it absolutely categorically clear to you, the listener, that we are not endorsing these viewpoints.
No, we are not taking sides. We aren't here to be advocates.
Our only job, really, is to impartially report the arguments.
Right, the frameworks and the philosophical ideas contained in this text.
Yeah.
We are holding the author's exact perspective up to the light so you can examine the machinery she is describing.
So you can understand the history she references and evaluate it for yourself.
That's the perfect way to frame it. We are looking at a blueprint.
And to understand the scope of this blueprint, we actually have to start small.
Like micro-level small.
Exactly. In the living room, in the kitchen, around the dinner table, before we can scale up to the boardroom or the courthouse.
We have to understand the foundational premise of why this text argues the modern household is a fundamentally rigged economic and emotional arrangement.
Let's unpack this core concept right away, the tithe.
Okay, yeah. When I hear the word tithe, I immediately think of an ancient religious tax.
Right, a mandatory 10%.
Exactly. 10% of your crop or your income that you surrender to an authority figure just to remain in good standing. But the framework here introduces an emotional tithe.
Which is very different.
Right. What exactly is the currency being extracted here? Because it's obviously not wheat or gold.
No, it's described as a hidden, completely unagreed upon tax levied specifically against men.
Okay.
It's the unpaid, constant labor of absorbing manufactured crises and stabilizing a relational instability that the man did not actually cause.
If we look closely at how the text defines this, it's described almost like a sword of Damocles hanging over the modern man's head.
Yes, but it's suspended by a single thread of a female partner's shifting mood.
That's so precarious.
It is. And what makes this analysis unique is how literal it gets regarding the actual cost of this tax. The author calculates the relational cost of a single sigh.
Wait, really? A literal sigh.
Yes, we aren't talking about a screaming match. We aren't talking about a thrown plate or an explicit accusation of wrongdoing. Just a heavy, ambiguous exhale from across the room. The text claims that this single sigh costs the man, quote, 6 hours of lost sleep, 2 days of muted speech, and initiates an endless, exhausting psychological audit.
Where he is desperately trying to reverse engineer his entire week to figure out what he did wrong.
Exactly.
It's an entirely invisible economy. And the book uses this brilliant metaphor of a hidden ledger to explain it.
I'm glad you brought that up.
I want to spend some time exploring this because this is where the economic reality of the home gets turned entirely upside down.
The hidden ledger is the foundational accounting system of the modern relationship under this framework.
Right.
So on one side of the ledger, you have male provision. Now, traditionally, we think of this as just a paycheck.
Sure, financial provision.
But the text expands this to physical infrastructure, emotional steadiness, fixing the roof, providing physical security.
Maintaining the vehicles, killing the spider, handling the logistics of the mortgage, all of it.
Exactly. The argument is that in this hidden ledger, all of that massive life-sustaining output is treated as a finite baseline expectation.
Like, it's essentially treated as the gravity of the house.
Yes. It receives absolutely zero credit because it is simply expected to be there.
Which, I mean, makes sense in a twisted way. You don't wake up every morning and hand a gold star to the concept of gravity.
Right, you just expect your feet to hit the floor.
So the man's massive foundational provision is just background noise.
Precisely. It is invisible until it fails. But on the exact opposite side of that ledger is female emotional consumption.
Okay, what does that consist of?
This is the demand for constant attunement, for validation, for co-regulation of her nervous system.
Ah.
And this side of the ledger is treated as an infinite demand requiring constant, high-cost maintenance.
So the dynamic becomes one where the man is pouring the concrete, framing the walls, and paving the road.
But he is simultaneously being heavily taxed because he isn't admiring the sunset from the exact right emotional angle while he's pouring that concrete.
Man, I keep picturing a totally rigged banking system. Like, imagine if you have a bank account and every massive deposit you make your paycheck, your grueling physical labor, your steady protection is instantly vaporized the second the teller processes it.
Right, the balance always reads exactly zero.
Exactly. You get no accumulated wealth for your good deeds.
Right.
But the overdraft fees for a single missed emotional cue.
Like forgetting the anniversary of the day you met.
Yeah, or just having a quiet, distant mood while driving those overdraft fees compound hourly.
Ew.
According to this framework, if a man is providing all this concrete, undeniable stability, how is it logically possible that a single forgotten date can completely bankrupt his entire relational account?
It seems impossible.
Right. Why doesn't the massive backlog of good deeds protect him?
That is the exact paradox the author addresses, and she uses a specific term for it. She calls it the fallacy of the isolated incident as data.
Okay, break that down for me.
The system isn't glitching when it bankrupts him. It is functioning exactly as designed. The argument here is that the emotional economy of the home is designed so that a single emotional outburst or a single perceived slight on a random Tuesday completely overwrites hundreds of days of steady provision.
Wow.
The emotional spike entirely erases the data of the aggregate.
Okay, let's translate that for a second. It's essentially a corrupted hard drive.
That's a good way to look at it.
Like, the system doesn't save the good files. It doesn't back up the thousands of days you came home on time, paid the bills, and supported the family.
No, it only saves the error reports.
So the isolated incident completely replaces the entire history of the relationship.
That is a very accurate way to visualize it. The text argues that this dynamic creates a profound epistemic corruption.
Epistemic corruption.
Yeah. You have a scenario where a woman can catalog a single sharp inflection in his voice from 3 years ago, hold on to it, and recalibrate it as a foundational betrayal of her safety.
While ignoring the rest.
Right. Meanwhile, she completely ignores decades of the man's unflashy stoic reliability. His daily labor goes unrecorded in the ledger, But his failure to manage her internal mood is itemized as a permanent, unforgivable debt that she can collect on at any time.
Which raises the immediate question of enforcement.
Because someone has to collect the debt.
Exactly. If this ledger is this deeply rigged, how are these rules actually enforced day to day? Because if you owe money to the IRS, they send you a certified letter.
Right, you get a physical notice.
If you overdraft your rigged bank account, you get an alert on your phone. How is this invisible emotional tax collected without a physical paper trail?
It's a great question.
If an entire generation is conditioned to accept this, there has to be a mechanism.
The mechanism is what the text brilliantly calls the HR of the heart.
HR of the heart, that's so descriptive.
The author argues that the modern home has undergone a structural transformation. It has ceased to be a sanctuary of mutual rest and has been transformed into a domestic tribunal.
Courtroom.
Basically, yes. But it's a terrifying kind of courtroom where, quote, mood is the law, your defense is the crime, and the sentence is rehearsed before the accusation is even articulated.
That is such a chilling concept. The idea that someone's internal comfort level is being conflated with constitutional rights.
It is a massive linguistic and cultural shift. In a healthy dynamic, comfort is a negotiated privilege. We work together to make each other comfortable.
Right, it's cooperative.
But when comfort is demanded as statutory law, when I feel uncomfortable is treated the same as you have violated my civil rights, the household becomes what the author terms a welfare state for the nervous system.
A welfare state for the nervous system.
Exactly. The man is mandated to continuously subsidize her emotional peace using his own autonomy as the currency.
And the jurisdiction of this court must be impossible to satisfy.
It is, because it relies on telepathy as jurisdiction.
Telepathy, meaning the literal expectation that a man must be able to read his partner's mind to avoid the tax.
You got it. The hidden premise of this emotional jurisdiction is the romanticized, deeply toxic idea that true love requires mind reading.
Right. If you love me, you'd know.
Exactly. The man is expected to intuitively guess the unspoken offense that has caused the sigh or the sudden silent treatment over dinner.
And if he guesses correctly.
Say he figures out she's mad about how we loaded the dishwasher. The text says he doesn't get credit. Instead, he is accused of playing games because if he knew what was wrong, he should have fixed it before she had to sigh.
Oh, wow. So guessing right is literally a crime.
It is.
And guessing wrong.
If he guesses incorrectly or simply admits he has no idea why she's upset, he is accused of weaponized incompetence, ignorance, and a total fundamental lack of empathy.
It's a perfect trap. Heads I win, tails you lose. There's literally no right answer.
None.
Which brings us to this specific acronym the author unpacks. And I think this is one of the most practical, recognizable mechanics in the entire text.
Oh, absolutely. The JD cycle.
Yes. JADE. Justify, argue, defend, explain. Let's really break down how this works in real time.
The JD trap is crucial. It originates from therapy models designed for managing highly manipulative or high-conflict personalities.
But the author maps it directly onto the everyday domestic tribunal.
Right. When a man is accused of an atmospheric, totally unmeasurable crime, something vague like, you're making me feel unsafe, or you've been emotionally distant lately, his natural, rational, masculine instinct is to state facts.
Because he wants to fix it.
Exactly. He tries to justify, argue, defend, or explain his actions logically to clear his name.
Right, he treats it like a normal courtroom. He brings concrete facts to what is fundamentally a feeling fight.
Which is his first mistake.
Let's do a hypothetical here. Say a man is sitting on the couch on a Saturday afternoon, quietly reading a biography.
Okay.
His partner walks in, sees him silent, and her mood shifts. She says, "Why are you punishing me today? Why are you so angry?"
A classic atmospheric accusation.
His immediate instinct is going to be, "I'm not punishing you. I'm literally just reading a book. I've been sitting here for an hour. I'm not angry at all."
Yeah.
That's him explaining and defending. Yeah.
Yes, and according to the text, the exact moment he does that, the trap snaps shut. His factual defense is instantly reframed by the tribunal as pushback or invalidation.
Wait, how does stating a fact equal invalidation?
The author lays out the silent syllogism that governs this entire interaction.
Okay, let's hear it.
Premise 1, her feeling is her absolute reality. Premise 2, any male defense contradicts her feeling, thereby invalidating it.
Oh, man.
Premise 3, emotional invalidation is currently categorized by popular psychology as a tangible abusive harm. Therefore, all male defense is categorized as an act of violence.
That's wild. So the more he explains that he was just reading a book, the guiltier he becomes of the new crime,
Yeah.
invalidating her lived experience.
Exactly. His calm logic is aggressively recoded as coldness, control, or cruelty.
It's Kafkaesque. It is a literal Kafka trial, where the exact action you take to prove your innocence is the exact action that gets you convicted.
It really is.
You say, here is the evidence that I didn't ignore you, and the response is, the fact that you are prioritizing evidence over my feelings proves you don't care about me.
Yep. And this dynamic ties perfectly into what the book cites regarding Dr. Robert Glover's famous work, No More Mr. Nice Guy.
Oh yeah, let's talk about the nice guy paradox.
It's a seamless integration of Glover's clinical observations. The author maps the nice guy paradox directly onto this economic reality.
How does that play out?
The classic nice guy looks at this impossible tribunal and decides his best strategy is to simply purchase peace by acting as a human shock absorber.
So he just takes it.
Right. He absorbs all the weather, all the dysregulation, all the manufactured accusations. He thinks that his constant appeasement, his refusal to fight back, will eventually buy him a peaceful, stable home.
He thinks if he just pays the emotional tithe quietly, the tax collector will eventually leave him alone.
But the text argues that appeasement doesn't buy peace at all, does it?
Far from it. The author insists that this strategy is actually fatal.
Because it incentivizes the behavior.
Exactly. By constantly yielding and absorbing the chaos without pushing back, he doesn't create peace. He manufactures deep structural contempt.
Right.
By rewarding her emotional volatility with his calm appeasement, he mathematically incentivizes her to test him further. He thinks he is buying peace, but he's merely renting it at an increasingly exorbitant daily rate.
And then what happens?
The eviction notice is served the exact moment he finally becomes too exhausted to pay the premium and tries to set a tiny boundary.
And that sudden boundary is immediately rebranded by the partner as a hidden abusive cruelty he was harboring all along.
Okay, here's where we need to stop and look at the engine under the hood, because I can hear the listener asking the exact same question I'm asking.
Which is?
Why does the author argue that this tension is manufactured? That's a very intentional word. Why couldn't this just be accidental friction?
It's a fair question.
Right. We have two different genders, two different communication styles, maybe just a misunderstanding of how to connect. Why use a deliberate word like manufactured?
That is the pivotal insight of the text, and it brings us to what the author calls the drama engine.
The drama engine. Okay.
The text posits that this is not a communication error. It is a highly specific psychological mechanism functioning exactly as intended.
How does it work?
The etiology of the drama engine works like this. First, you have a modern mind that has been conditioned to depend on high emotional stimulation to feel secure.
Okay, so it needs chaos to feel normal.
Right. Second, that drama-dependent mind begins to interpret peace, silence, and stoic steadiness as emotional neglect. If nothing is happening, they feel abandoned.
So if the house is quiet and he's just reading his book, like in our earlier example, her alarm bells go off because there is no emotional voltage.
Precisely. Therefore, if tension and conflict are required to prove that the relationship is actively engaged and alive, then tension must be manufactured.
Because peace feels like death to the drama engine.
Exactly. The fight isn't a malfunction of the relationship. The fight is the feature.
The conflict is the communication.
The text explicitly states, the fight is not a malfunction, it is the communication. The man slowly learns that he cannot win by simply being good, steady, and reliable.
Because steady is boring.
Exactly. He has to be interesting, and to the drama engine, interest requires friction. The engine doesn't actually want him to fix the problem. If he fixes it, the engagement ends.
Right.
It wants him to feel the problem with her. The conflict itself is the actual product being generated, and whatever apology he eventually offers is just the packaging it comes in.
Wow. Okay, so we've thoroughly mapped out the micro level.
Right.
We've looked at the living room, the hidden ledger, the telepathy tax, the JDE cycle, and this insatiable drama engine.
It's a lot.
It is. But if an entire generation is conditioned to treat comfort as a constitutional right at home, they don't suddenly turn that off when they badge into the office.
It's definitely not.
The author argues this doesn't stop at the front door. This exact same dynamic scales up to the macro level. It captures entire institutions.
And this is where the book makes some of its most polarizing, sweeping claims about how society operates today.
Let's look at what she calls the DEI empathy tax.
The author asserts that the corporate world, specifically modern human resources departments and compliance offices, have completely adopted the exact playbook of the domestic tribunal.
The framework has just been formalized.
Right. The modern corporate compliance office, according to the text, no longer measures employee output in dollars, code, or deliverables. It increasingly measures output in size, in feelings of inclusion, and in the absence of perceived defense.
The text mentions mandatory corporate training specifically. How does the domestic emotional tithe manifest in a corporate seminar?
The book claims that in these mandatory diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings, male professionals, specifically white-collar men, are essentially forced to sit quietly while their demographic is narrated as a site of historical and ongoing injury to everyone else.
So they just have to take it.
Yeah, they are allegedly forced to validate grievances about their own displacement and practically apologize for their baseline existence or success.
And if they don't,
If a man refuses to perform this emotional theater, or if he asks for data to back up the claims being made in the seminar, his request for evidence is documented as resistance or creating a toxic environment.
because questioning the feeling is a crime.
Right. The institution is extracting emotional compliance in exchange for the illusion of corporate inclusion.
And this brings us to a really fascinating sociological concept the author leans on, the gamma bias.
Yes, this is a crucial concept.
Let's spend some time here because this explains the why behind the corporate shift. What is the gamma bias, and why are human beings wired this way?
The gamma bias is a concept from social psychology that highlights the cognitive distortion in how society views gender.
Okay.
Simply put, it is the systemic mechanism that automatically rewards female distress and simultaneously punishes or ignores male stoic competence.
And there's an evolutionary root to this, right?
There is. The evolutionary argument is that human beings are hardwired to protect the reproducer of the species. When a woman cries, the entire village is biologically programmed to rush in, offer resources, neutralize the threat, and soothe her.
It's an ancient survival mechanism that kept the species alive.
Exactly. But the text argues it's been hijacked by modern bureaucracy.
How so?
What used to be a physical survival mechanism has been institutionalized into a corporate weapon. The text argues that in these captured institutions, a woman who performs distress, who cries in a meeting, or who files a vague grievance about feeling unsupported, receives immediate resources, promotions, sympathy, and structural power.
Wow. And the men.
Conversely, a man who remains entirely calm, stoic, and problem-focused during a corporate crisis is systematically punished for exhibiting classical masculine virtue.
Because his lack of visible panic is read as a lack of empathy.
Exactly.
The book gives a really specific, highly detailed example of this, the story of the senior engineer. Let's walk through what happened there.
Yes, the text details a very telling corporate scenario. There was a massive database failure at a tech company, a real crisis where millions of dollars were on the line.
A major outage.
Right. A senior male engineer immediately goes into the server room, completely isolates himself from the panic, and calmly, methodically writes the script to restore the system.
Okay, so he's doing his job.
Meanwhile, his female colleague is having a total meltdown, crying in the conference room because the stress of the outage is too much for her.
So he is actually fixing the physical problem while she is generating an emotional problem.
Right. And what is the outcome? According to the author, the senior engineer is essentially coached out of his job shortly after.
Wait, he got fired for fixing the server?
His mistake wasn't incompetence. He literally saved the company. His mistake was refusing to panic alongside his colleagues.
Unbelievable.
His calm, quiet focus in the server room was reframed by HR as arrogance, and his silence during her meltdown was labeled contempt.
And what happened to the coworker who was crying?
The female colleague, who sobbed at her desk, entirely unable to perform her technical duties, was promoted a month later to a newly created wellness coordinator role.
Well, the man who saved the database received a severance package because he wasn't a culture fit.
You can't make it up.
It's unbelievable. It's like being a meteorologist for someone else's internal climate.
That's a great analogy.
Right. You're the guy who built the weather station, you poured the concrete, you set up the radar, you predicted the storm, but you're being fired because you couldn't stop it from raining inside your coworker's mind.
Exactly. You are being held responsible for the weather.
And the author points out that this isn't just in tech. She looks at the university system too, specifically the Title IX tribunals. She references the famous mattress protests at Columbia and Stanford.
Right. The text uses those highly publicized campus protests as the beta test for this total institutional capture.
Okay, how does that work in a university setting?
The author claims that in these campus Title IX tribunals, male students were subjected to relentless campaigns of social and institutional execution, completely devoid of traditional due process.
So no cross-examination, no presumption of innocence.
None. Furthermore, the text argues that when these accused male students offered calm, legalistic, and highly factual offenses, bringing in timestamp texts and geolocation data to prove they weren't even present, the very act of proving their innocence was actively reframed by the university tribunal as an act of violence against female vulnerability.
Wait, really? Because his objective facts disrupted the sanctified atmosphere of her subjective feelings.
Exactly. The text states that a female accuser, even if speaking in contradictory fragments, is protected by an impenetrable shield of therapeutic jargon. She is living her truth.
And the guy?
Meanwhile, the male student is actively punished for citing concrete evidence. In these captured spaces, subjective feeling is structurally elevated to the status of objective fact, and objective fact is demoted to the status of a microaggression.
The book also looks at media capture. It cites that infamous 2019 Gillette ad, "The best men can be." I remember the massive uproar over that.
Oh, yeah. It was huge.
How does the author frame that cultural moment?
The author views that specific advertising campaign as the perfect media artifact of a completely hijacked moral architecture.
What does the text say the ad was actually doing?
The text claims the ad took baseline, healthy male joy, things like young boys wrestling in the grass or men joking with each other at a weekend barbecue, and indicted all of it as evidence of systemic cruelty, toxic masculinity, and complicity in female suffering.
Wow.
The author describes it not as a commercial selling razors, but as a public corporate inquisition demanding mass male contrition for simply existing.
And then, of course, the book tackles the James Damore case from Google.
Yes, the Damore case from 2017 is used as the ultimate crystallization of this dynamic.
Remind me what happened there.
Vonor, a software engineer, wrote a very calm, heavily cited internal memo regarding biological differences in population distributions. He was trying to explain why there might not be a 50-50 gender parity in certain high-stress tech roles.
Right, and he used actual science.
He cited mainstream evolutionary psychology, and he was instantly fired.
So the author uses this to prove a point about institutions.
She uses this to argue that inside capture institutions, rational data, biological reality, and the scientific method itself are treated as literal existential threats if they fail to perfectly validate the required emotional narrative of the HR department.
So we have to pull back and ask the massive structural question here.
Right, the historical question.
How does the author trace the history of this shift? When did our institutions, the very institutions that literally built the modern world, built the power grid, built the internet, established the legal code, when did they stop valuing concrete competence and start, as the book claims, worshiping fragility?
How did we get here philosophically?
Exactly.
To answer that, the author dives incredibly deep into moral psychology, specifically weaponizing the work of the renowned social psychologist Jonathan Haidt.
Oh, Haidt? Okay.
The text leans very heavily on Haidt's moral foundations theory, which was popularized in his phenomenal 2012 book, The Righteous Mind.
Okay, let's unpack Haidt's framework, because if we don't understand the underlying psychology, none of this societal shift makes sense.
True.
What are these foundations and how does Riker use them?
Haidt proposes that human morality isn't just one thing. It is based on several distinct, innate evolutionary foundations. Think of them like taste receptors on the tongue.
Right, different flavors of morality.
The primary ones are care harm, fairness cheating, loyalty betrayal, authority subversion, and sanctity degradation.
Okay.
Now, Riker points out the psychological data showing that women, on average, score significantly higher on the care harm foundation.
Which makes sense.
It makes evolutionary sense, yes.
Yeah.
It is biologically linked to infant care vigilance, threat detection, and keeping the vulnerable safe.
And men.
Men, on the other hand, typically score much higher on the foundations of loyalty, authority, and sanctity, which are required for building large-scale structures, defending borders, and maintaining civilizational order.
And the author's core claim is that this care arm foundation hasn't just been emphasized, it's been hijacked.
Completely weaponized and isolated. The text argues that a post-1970s feminist ideology, combined with Marxist critical theory to capture the single moral pillar care harm and elevate it above all the others, completely erasing and pathologizing the male-coded foundations.
So the other foundations are basically outlawed.
Under this new regime, loyalty is called tribalism, authority is called fascism, sanctity is called bigotry.
Wow.
The author states that modern progressive politics obsessively overweights care harm to turn the entire Western world into a macroscopic daycare center, where the mitigation of female anxiety dictates the law of the land, completely overriding fairness or truth.
So compassion, when it is entirely unbound from justice, truth, or authority, actually becomes a weapon of control.
That is the exact thesis. The author writes, compassion untethered from objective truth is not virtue, it is sentimental tyranny.
The sentimental tyranny.
The claim is that this imbalanced framework rewards theatrical dysfunction, incentivizes victimhood, and actively punishes the stoic competence that actually keeps the lights on.
But the author goes back much further than hate, right? She traces this collapse all the way back to classical philosophy.
Oh, yes. Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas. This is where the book gets incredibly dense, but it's so vital.
What does she call it?
What the author calls the transcendental audit. The author appeals to the classical transcendentals of medieval and ancient philosophy: being, truth, goodness, and beauty.
The foundational concepts.
For millennia, these four concepts were considered the load-bearing walls of Western civilization. Truth was defined as the mind's strict conformity to objective reality.
And goodness.
Goodness wasn't just being nice. Goodness was the pursuit of proper rational order.
So what does it actually look like when those load-bearing walls are corrupted, according to the text? How does this philosophical shift play out in a modern boardroom or a relationship?
The text asserts a very precise pathology of corruption. Truth has surrendered to relativism. It has been replaced by the concept of lived experience, where the only fact that matters is the one currently being felt by the person claiming victimhood.
So reality is totally subjective now.
If I feel you were aggressive, then you were aggressive, regardless of the decibel level of your voice.
What about goodness?
Goodness has been reduced to mere emotional appetite, measured solely by the absence of tears or discomfort. Justice has devolved into systemic envy, and being itself has collapsed into nihilism.
It's a stark, unyielding, and brutal claim. The author is essentially saying that modern feminism in its current institutional iteration is not an equality movement.
No, not at all, according to the book.
To quote the text directly, she calls it a hate movement that projects a father complex onto an imaginary patriarchy.
And she argues that to achieve this, they had to fundamentally rewire the English lexicon.
The rewiring of the lexicon is a major tactical focus of the book. The author argues that words have been captured and hollowed out.
Think about the word safety.
Right. Safety used to mean physical protection from kinetic harm, a locked door, a seat belt, an alarm system.
Now, the text argues safety translates strictly to female emotional comfort and male obedience.
And harm no longer means a physical injury, it means male dissent, or bringing factual pushback to a meeting.
And trauma, perhaps the most overused word in the modern era, now operates as an unfalsifiable veto card against objective reality.
How so?
If someone claims trauma, all logical inquiry must instantly cease.
It really is like the words we use every single day have been hollowed out. The original objective meaning has been scooped out and they've been refilled with new, weaponized definitions explicitly designed to end debate before it begins.
Exactly.
But surely, and I have to push back here because this is where the rubber meets the road, surely the legal system acts as a firewall against this.
You think so?
Right. You can manipulate HR, you can manipulate university tribunal, but the actual courts, the courts are based on hard evidence, perjury laws, cross-examination, physical receipts. They can't possibly operate on pure emotional logic, can they?
That is the logical assumption. But according to the author, the legal system is not a firewall at all. In fact, it is the ultimate enforcer.
The enforcer.
This brings us to part 5 of the book, the family law pipeline, which the text describes as the ultimate state-sponsored extraction of the emotional tithe.
The text actually refers to it as the courtroom of tears, which is incredibly evocative.
The author argues that the legal machine, particularly family law, was never impartial, and that modern family courts operate on the exact same corrupted grammar of feelings as evidence that the domestic living room tribunal uses.
So it's just scaled up.
The pipeline is designed to take a kitchen sink emotional meltdown and translate it directly into literal, state-enforced asset forfeiture.
But how does that actually work mechanically? You can't just subpoena a feeling. A judge needs to see something concrete.
The text claims that the standard of evidence has been entirely subverted. The book argues that vague affidavits of maternal anxiety statements like, "I feel overwhelmed when he is around," or "his tone makes me feel unsafe," are routinely accepted by family court judges as sufficient primary grounds to restrict paternal access to children and extract resources.
Just based on a claim of anxiety.
If a mother breaks down crying during a deposition and claims she feels unsafe again, using those redefined, weaponized terms we just discussed, her subjective distress is immediately medically notarized and catered to by the power of the state.
So the feeling becomes legal fact.
In this venue, lived experience legally and functionally outranks physical evidence.
And what happens when the man brings in his evidence? Because presumably the sovereign man we talked about is keeping records.
If the man attempts to introduce objective facts, text logs, or documentation of his steady historical provision, the text claims he is frequently accused of being litigious, controlling, or weaponizing his privilege.
He's punished for defending himself.
Furthermore, the text states that the massive bureaucracy of the family court, the guardians ad litem, the parenting coordinators, the independent evaluators, the court-mandated therapists acts as a parasitic industry that feeds entirely on male provision.
It literally monetizes the conflict.
Okay.
It treats the friction as a natural resource to be mined.
Exactly. The mother's emotional instability or vague accusations generate the need for the industry, but it is subsidized entirely by the father's forced labor.
Wow.
Every single unverified claim of anxiety generates a new layer of mandatory mediation, a new court docket, a new psychological evaluation, and a new billing hour. The system requires the conflict to exist so it can continue to bill for it.
And this leads to what the author calls the double standard of provision, which might be the most economically terrifying concept in the entire book.
Oh, it's bleak. The book asserts that the state demands absolutely flawless, uninterrupted male financial provision. The father must pay the mortgage, pay the child support, and maintain the infrastructure.
He has to fund the whole thing.
The state demands he pay for the roof over her head, while simultaneously subsidizing her unchecked emotional consumption, often legally barring him from stepping inside the very house he pays for, based solely on her claim of feeling overwhelmed.
It's total accountability, completely divorced from any authority.
The author says the court transforms the traditional father from a bleeding heart into a fiscal and legal butcher block, carved up to feed the bureaucratic machine.
Okay, the author has laid out an incredibly bleak, suffocating, and terrifying architectural landscape.
She really has.
We've seen how the living room is a tribunal, the HR department is an empathy trap, the university is an inquisition, and the family court is a literal asset forfeiture machine.
It is heavy, heavy material.
But the book doesn't end there. We move to part 6, the counteroffensive. The author actually proposes concrete solutions for the listener. What is the way out of this matrix?
The way out, according to the text, is the absolute restoration of what she calls male sovereignty and realizing the detachment dividend.
How does this start?
It begins with a very strict, almost mechanical protocol called the logical audit.
Right. The author gives 4 exact sequential questions a man must ask himself and his partner to cut through the emotional fog of the tribunal. Let's walk through those carefully because this is the actionable part of the text.
When faced with an atmospheric emotional jurisdiction claim, the sovereign man must ask, 1. What is the specific physical task being requested?
Okay.
2. What is the objective, measurable standard of completion for that task? 3. Where is the tangible reciprocity for the male labor being expended?
And the 4th.
And 4. How is this entire demand objectively measurable by a third party?
Wow. It forces the atmospheric, vague complaint down into concrete, undeniable reality. It forces the ghost into a physical body.
Exactly. It forces the emotional claim into the court of physical facts. If the claimant cannot clearly answer all 4 of those questions, the author advises the man to simply, quietly decline to pay the tithe. He must refuse to engage.
And this ties directly into refusing that Jade E cycle we talked about earlier. No justifying, no arguing, no defending, no explaining.
The mandate is for ruthless, unemotional, plain speech.
Give me an example of what that looks like.
The book gives a great practical example of how to break the cycle. We talked earlier about the man reading quietly and his partner accusing him of being distant to punish her.
Right, the mind-reading telepathy tax where his silence is criminalized.
In the old paradigm, the nice guy paradigm, he launches into a 5-minute defense of his emotional history to prove he isn't angry. He begs her to believe he is just reading.
And that traps him.
In the new paradigm of male sovereignty, he simply states the concrete fact and demands the objective warrant. He looks up and says, I am reading a book. What exact specific words or physical actions indicate to you that I am punishing you?
Just straight up asking for the evidence.
He repeats the accusation calmly, forcing the absurdity of it into the light. And when no physical evidence materializes, because there is none, the theater loses its audience. He goes back to reading.
It's like dropping the rope in a tug of war.
That's a perfect analogy.
The entire game of tug of war only works, it only generates tension, if you agree to pull back on your end. If you just open your hands and drop the rope, the other person goes flying backward and the game is instantly over.
Exactly.
But I have to ask, doesn't the author worry that this extreme stoicism, this intense male sovereignty and refusal to engage emotionally will just lead to a cold, dead relationship? Won't it just result in total isolation?
The author brilliantly anticipates that exact objection. She notes that the emotional tyrant, or the captured institution, will immediately use the slippery slope fallacy to claim that any male detachment, any refusal to co-regulate their anxiety will lead to the destruction of the relationship.
But she disagrees.
But the text argues that male sovereignty is not cruelty. It is not abuse. It is simply the necessary architectural shift from reactive, anxious survival to proactive, rational order.
So what does a sovereign man actually do day to day to maintain this order?
He becomes an archivist of his own life. He documents facts. He keeps a literal ledger of dates, tasks, and timestamps.
He builds his own actual ledger.
He maintains strict digital privacy, treating every text message and email as potential tribunal evidence. He absolutely refuses to treat shifting, emotional tectonic plates as stable ground to build a life on.
And what's the phrase the author uses?
And most importantly, as the author quips, he brings a spreadsheet to a sob story. He demands evidence, proportion, and objective due process in his own home and in his workplace.
And the ultimate result of this, what is the detachment dividend?
The book concludes with some very compelling anecdotal data. It claims that men who successfully reclaim this traditional stoic agency, who stop caring if they are called insensitive by a broken system, report vastly lower rates of corporate burnout, lower blood pressure, and a near total elimination of clinical depression.
That's incredible.
By refusing to absorb the undisciplined, chaotic emotional states of others, they free up massive amounts of cognitive bandwidth. They use that bandwidth to build actual wealth, focus on their physical health, and truly protect their families from external threats.
So true peace requires boundaries.
True peace, the author argues, requires objective standards. It cannot be achieved through a hostage negotiation. The sovereign man doesn't try to destroy the emotional storm, he simply refuses to be the vessel it uses to make landfall.
Wow. Okay. We have covered a truly massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
We journeyed from the microeconomics of a single sigh and the hidden ledger of the domestic emotional tithe, all the way up to the total institutional capture of corporate HR departments, university tribunals, and the asset forfeiture machine of the family court system.
Ooh, that's quite the scope.
We looked at the philosophical decay of the transcendentals, and we ended with the author's proposed return to classical, objective male sovereignty, demanding receipts and refusing the JD cycle.
It is a dense, provocative journey, but the core thesis remains entirely unyielding throughout the text.
That the modern system taxes male steadiness to fund female volatility, and the only way to stop the extraction is to simply stop recognizing feelings as legal tender.
Yes.
It leaves me with a final, really provocative thought, something that wasn't explicitly spelled out in the text, but builds right on top of this massive source material.
What's that?
If this author is right, if the entire bureaucratic, legal, and relational economy of the modern West runs on the fiat currency of emotional distress and manufactured victimhood,
Right.
what happens to society if men simply stop recognizing the currency?
That's a big question.
Right? If millions of men simultaneously drop the rope, demand objective receipts, and absolutely refuse to pay the emotional tithe, does the whole bureaucratic system just collapse into total insolvency? Or does it finally, painfully, force a return to actual rational reciprocal partnership?
That is the ultimate question of systemic leverage, and it's a question every listener will have to answer for themselves.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep exploration. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button right now so you don't miss our next deep dive into the ideas shaping our world.
Definitely do that.
And we strongly, strongly urge you to check out the book for yourself. It is called Emotional Tithe: How Men Pay for the Privilege of Being Destroyed by Discomfort. It is available right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
Go explore these highly polarizing, fascinating arguments for yourself and see how they apply to your own X-rays.
And be sure to direct your browsers to follow @Conrad Riker on Substack for the author's ongoing analysis.
It's a text that absolutely demands you look at the architecture of your own life and ask yourself who is pouring the concrete and who is collecting the toll.
It certainly is, because at the end of the day, when you step into those incredibly murky relational waters, you can't rely on the easy answers anymore. The jagged line isn't cleanly displayed on a screen, it's hidden deep in the ledger. You just have to know how to read the math. Thanks for listening.